Welcome back to No Budget Films, and here I am again, for the time being after taking a long break. Previously, I said that I would retire from my channel, but well, here I am again, at least for now, ready with new video content. Now, I have decided to return for at least a short period of time, after discovering that I still have some more content to post here, and so here I am with a fresh new video. This video now was inspired by a new Byzantine project of mine, featuring postcards of 6 different military units from Byzantine history, which shall be out soon. While waiting for the release of my new product, I have decided to return to the channel and create a video related to it. The Byzantine Empire now certainly lasted for over 1,000 years, and in those years, their army surely developed a lot, with the introduction of new military units with a specialized function. The most famous of the Byzantine military units now include the mounted armored Cataphract cavalryman and the elite Varangian Guard. However, there's still a lot more than that. In this video, I will thus go over what I consider to be my 6 best Byzantine army units from throughout their whole history from the 4th to 15th centuries in a chronological pattern. But before we begin with the list, please continue to support my channel by subscribing to it or checking out my Patreon site. The link will be in the description below. And so, let us start! Everyone who knows the Roman Empire for sure knows the Roman legions, the famous military unit that brought Rome to victory and thus making it a superpower. However, not a lot know of the new kind of military unit the famous Roman legions have evolved into by the time of the 4th century. Although the legions still continue to exist, the name of their unit as well as their arms, armor, and fighting styles have changed. This new unit that had replaced the Roman legions was known as the Comitatenses, which consisted of much more flexible troops but nevertheless still formed the backbone of the Roman army. This unit's name, which in singular is comitatus, comes from the Latin word meaning company, which in this sense also meant field army, as the Comitatenses true enough served as the mobile field army in the late Roman Empire. The Comitatenses too were a heavy infantry unit, and a legion of them would consist of up to 7,000 soldiers. When it came to war, the Comitatenses would rush to the empire's defense in case of an invasion, whereas the job to hold them off at the borders were left to the more inferior limitani or border guard troops. The Comitatenses though usually always fought in defensive positions, rather than on the offensive, as this was the empire's way to conserve manpower. Nevertheless, they were still formidable fighters that usually fought in a phalanx formation, whereas the spear was their primary weapon. The Comitatenses soldiers of the late Roman Empire now were equipped with a long spear and longsword or spada as their weapons, a large shield wherein its pattern indicates which division they came from, scale or mail armor, and a ridge helmet. It is because of the Comitatenses' flexibility and their effectiveness on the battlefield to why I consider them to be on this list of my best Byzantine military units. Before the rise of the Byzantine Empire in the 4th century, the Roman Empire had the Praetorian Guard as an elite bodyguard unit protecting the Roman Emperor. However, due to their constant treachery, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great in 312 disbanded the Praetorian Guard and replaced them with a new unit loyal to the Emperor known as the Scholae Palatinae. However, as the decades passed, things too had changed, as for one, the Roman Empire was permanently split in half between East and West in 395, whereas the East continued to survive, all while the West, being the weaker half, fell in 476. Although the empire was split, the Scholae Palatinae continued to serve both in the East and West, wherein most of its soldiers belonged to foreign barbarian nations, such as the Franks and Goths. Eventually, the Palatinae in the East had devolved into parade troops, and thus a new elite unit that would be undyingly loyal to the emperor had to be formed. This new unit was thus formed by the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Emperor Leo I in 460, and at first consisted of 300 men recruited from the people of Isauria, a mountainous province in Byzantine Asia Minor known for its warlike tribesmen. Seeing that they would be fully loyal to him, Leo I thus incorporated these Isaurian warriors into the army into an elite guard force known as the Excubitors, which in Latin meant those out of bed, or sentinels, as they true enough were assigned to guard the emperor at all times of the day. Over the years, the Excubitors continued to loyally protect the emperor, whereas a few of its commanders have even risen up the ranks to become Byzantine emperors, and these included the likes of Zeno, Justin I, Tiberius II, and Maurice. Despite being palace guards, the Excubitors, when needed, would accompany the emperor to battle, and this was seen during the reigns of the emperors Maurice in the late 6th century and Heraclius in the 7th century. Now, the reason why I consider the Excubitors to be part of my favorite Byzantine army units is not just because of their colorful armor and attire, as well as shields, which was meant to indicate their status as imperial guards, but because of their loyalty to the emperor, that there were only very few instances where they plotted to overthrow an emperor, such as in 610, when the usurper Phocas was overthrown thanks to their help, but this was still a good thing anyway, as thanks to the Excubitors, the cruel and incompetent Phocas was taken down. The Excubitors, though, like their predecessor the Palatine, had also been demoted into parade troops by the 8th century, but would still occasionally accompany the emperor in battle, until they were last mentioned in historical sources in 1081 during the catastrophic Battle of Dyrrhachion, where the Byzantines lost to the Normans. If you wonder what had become of the Excubitors by the 8th century, this new unit known as the Tagmata had taken their place as the new Imperial Guard force. The Excubitors, though, did not cease to exist. Rather, the 8th century Byzantine Emperor Constantine V had incorporated them into the new elite military unit he created known as the Tagmata. As a new Imperial Guard force, the role of the Tagmata was to be the one to protect the emperor in battle, but also to guard the capital Constantinople. The Tagmata, though, were not just a single force, but it too consisted of other specialized troops, such as the cavalry force known as the Athanatoi or Immortals, the Vigla or City Watch troops, and of course the famous Varangian Guard, which we shall discuss later. Now, over the years, the size of the Tagmata had grown in number, thus they were assigned not only to the capital but to other major cities of the empire, both as infantry and cavalry troops. The commander of this unit, meanwhile, was known as the Domesticus, which was a very powerful position in the empire, and very close to the emperor himself, yet he too could have enough power to overthrow the emperor, considering that he has the most powerful troops in the empire. Now, the reason to why I consider the Tagmata as one of my top Byzantine army units is because of how powerful they were as an elite professional force and their fearlessness in battle. With the Byzantine Empire, especially from the 9th to 12th centuries, being the military superpower of the Middle Ages, it was known to have had a professional army recruited from within the empire's themes or military provinces, hence it was known as the thematic army. These professional troops that the Byzantine Empire had included both infantry and cavalry forces, both being effective in the battlefield, and one such professional heavy infantry unit of Byzantium were the Skoutatoi. The name of this unit meant shield bearer in Greek, and they were mostly prominent in the Byzantine army during the rule of the Macedonian dynasty from 867 to 1056. As suggested by its name, the Skoutatoi always bore a kite-shaped shield known as a skouton, whereas for their weapons they primarily used a long spear known as kontarion in Greek, or a javelin, known in Greek as an akontia, whereas they too always used the standard Byzantine longsword known as a spathion. As for their armor, they primarily wore either chainmail or lamellar armor over their tunics, and to protect their head, they wore a standard Byzantine helmet known as a kranos. The arms and armor of the Skoutatoi units, meanwhile, are more or less identical in appearance, as the themes of the Byzantine Empire true enough had central armories that manufactured the weapons and armor for all its troops, which just hints that the Byzantines surely did have a professional army. Although being just a standard infantry unit in the Byzantine army, I still consider the Skoutatoi to be one of my best, as they true enough personified the might of the professional Byzantine army at its golden age in the form of thousands of soldiers looking almost identical to each other, the same way the Roman legions of old did. If the Skoutatoi served as the main infantry force of the Byzantine Empire, for its cavalry, it was the famous heavy armored Cataphracts. The name of this unit derives from the Greek word kataphractos, meaning completely enclosed, and although they were famous in the Byzantine era, Cataphract cavalrymen had already existed since ancient times, originating in Persia, and throughout ancient history, Cataphracts had been used as elite cavalry forces by the Scythians, Sarmatians, Alans, Parthians, Achaemenid Persians, Armenians, Georgians, Seleucids, Sassanid Persians, Romans, Goths, Chinese, and Koreans. Ever since the 3rd century, the Roman Empire had begun adopting the Cataphract cavalry, which turned out to be one of the many military things the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire had inherited from ancient Rome. For the Byzantines, the Cataphracts were both a heavy and shock cavalry force with the purpose to break enemy formations the same way modern tanks do. During the heyday of the Byzantine Cataphract and the Byzantine Golden Age of the 10th and 11th centuries, they would attack in either row or wedge formations, both strategies developed by the military Byzantine Emperor Nikephoros II Phocas in the 10th century. As the name of their unit suggests, the Byzantine Cataphracts were completely enclosed in armor, whether chainmail or lamellar armor, and not just the rider but the horse too, both as a way to take down the enemy effectively and strike fear into them. Being a heavy and shock cavalry unit, the Byzantine Cataphract rider was heavily armored, usually with chainmail covering his entire face, and topped with a conical helmet, whereas for his body, a Cataphract wore a full set of armor, sometimes having lamellar armor over a chainmail shirt, and sometimes even a padded vest over his armor to prevent it from overheating in the hot sun. In order to serve their purpose in effectively breaking enemy formations, Byzantine Cataphracts too were equipped with multiple weapons, that sometimes one soldier would be armed with a long spear or kontarion, a sword whether the straight spathion or curved paramerion, an axe or mace, a bow to perform horse archery, and lastly a small shield, all at the same time. Overall, a full set of armor for a cataphract for both the horse and rider combined consisted of up to 1,300 scales, weighing up to 40 kilograms altogether. For basically being one of the deadliest and most badass cavalry forces in history, and how they proved to be so effective in the battlefield for the Byzantines, I consider the Cataphracts to be one of my top Byzantine military units. If the Cataphracts served as one of the most badass units in the Byzantine army, then wait until you've heard of the Varangian Guard. The Varangian Guard now happens to be one of the most famous units in the Byzantine army, and why not? They were originally either Vikings or people from Northern Europe, whether from Scandinavia or Russia, who traveled all the way to Byzantium to serve as the emperor's personal bodyguard, and this unit had lasted for a long time from the 10th to 14th centuries. The name of this unit, Varangian, or Varangos in Greek, derives from the Old Norse word var, meaning pledge, as these foreign warriors true enough swore an oath of loyalty to the Byzantine emperor, although Varangian was also the word the Byzantines referred to the Norsemen, as the same way the word Viking was what Western Europeans knew them as. Although Norsemen served as mercenaries for the Byzantine Empire since the 870s, they were only formally incorporated into the elite force or Tagmata of the Byzantine army as professional bodyguard units in the 980s, during the reign of Emperor Basil II, when 6,000 warriors from Russia and Scandinavia were sent to assist him in the civil war, which Basil won at the end thanks to them. As an imperial guard force, the Varangians were to protect the emperor at all times, whether in the battlefield or even when he ate and slept in the palace, while they too performed ceremonial duties, acted as a police force in hunting down conspirators against the emperor, crushed rebellions, and even guarded high-profile prisoners. In the battlefield, the Varangians were usually first to charge at the enemy, as their large sizes and battle axes true enough were able to intimidate and overpower them. Members of this unit usually came from the lands of the far north to seek wealth and adventure in the Byzantine Empire, and come home rich after serving the emperor for a number of years, though many in the Varangian Guard had also come home to either Russia or Scandinavia rich. If the emperor died, as in Varangian tradition, they would loot the emperor's treasury if ever the reigning emperor they served dies. Although most members of the Varangian Guard were Scandinavians, such as the future King of Norway Harald III Hardrada in the 11th century, a number of them too were Russians, and from the late 11th century onwards Anglo-Saxons from England. During the attacks on Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade in 1203 and 1204, the Varangians were present defending the Byzantine capital, but due to not receiving their pay, they went on strike and thus the city fell. The last mention of the Varangian Guard in battle was in 1259, as afterwards with the restoration of the Byzantine Empire in 1261, the Varangians, which were no longer Norsemen, Rus, or Anglo-Saxons, but Byzantine Greeks who could trace their origins, the original Varangians simply devolved into ceremonial troops. As an elite force of the army, and considering that they were always first to charge in battle, the Varangians were fully equipped in armor, both with chainmail shirts and lamellar armor over it. Whereas they too primarily wielded large two-handed axes known as Dane axes, usually drawn from behind them, and thus for wielding such large axes, they were known in Greek by the name Pelekiphoroi Barbaroi, meaning axe-bearing barbarians. Now, because of their undying loyalty to the emperor and their ability to fight in battle without the fear of dying, I consider the Varangians to be one of my top Byzantine army units. And now this is it for this video on my top 6 Byzantine military units. To sum it up, the Byzantine Empire did sure have a powerful army, both effective and cool looking military units, and this could be one of the reasons to why I think they lasted for so long. Anyway, do Do you agree with this list? Please tell me too in the comments if you agree, or if you have other favorite Byzantine army units. Thanks again for watching, and please continue to support me on Patreon if you can. Goodbye for now.